Hi, and welcome to this session of Rapid Data Exploration, where we're going to take a look at how you can do some powerful self-service analysis with PowerPivot. So first, I will take you through a very brief introduction as to what PowerPivot is, and then we'll quickly dive into the demos where we're going to take a look at the top 5 features that will be available with the next release of SQL Server. So what is PowerPivot? PowerPivot is really a tool that will help you redefine the lines that exist between the roles of end users and IT when it comes to creating business intelligence solutions. So there's two versions of PowerPivot, or two PowerPivots. You have PowerPivot for Excel for end users and PowerPivot for SharePoint, which is for IT. So essentially, using PowerPivot for Excel, end users can pull data from multiple sources, mash them up, build a model, and build their own BI applications directly in Excel, meaning they don't really need any help from IT. Once they're done with their solution and want to share it with other users, they can upload it to SharePoint. And this is where PowerPivot for SharePoint comes into place. This is where IT comes into place. So once the model has been uploaded to SharePoint, IT will have visibility into these different solutions. They can now see the different BI models and solutions. They can provision them, secure them, and basically manage them as BI solutions as part of the corporate SharePoint infrastructure. So in short, PowerPivot helps you bridge the gap that sometimes exists between end users on one side and IT on the other side. With that, let's dive into the demo where we are going to look at the top 5 features of PowerPivot for Excel. Okay, so here we are in Excel 2010, which is a prereq for PowerPivot. And I have my PowerPivot ribbon tab here. And first thing I'm going to do is start mashing up some data. So I'll launch the PowerPivot modeling window. You can see I've cheated a little bit and I've preloaded some tables. One of the strengths of PowerPivot is really enabling the end users to pull data from different sources, which is I've done here to begin with. Nothing here is really new in this release. So for this demo, I'll be working for a soft drink company. So you see I have different product categories here, juices, sparkling water, etc. So let's go to the first new feature that I want to be talking about, which is the diagram view. The diagram view is, without a doubt, the #1 most frequently requested feature we had after releasing the first version of PowerPivot. So end users contacted us saying, we really enjoy working with the data view, but it would be very useful for us to be able to see an overview of the model, see the entities and the relationships. So this is what we introduced with this new version of PowerPivot. We could really just have done a view of it, of the diagram here, but what we decided to do was to implement a fully fledged designer. So that is really what this is. It's fully interactive. We worked really hard to keep parity between the functions and features you have in the data view and what is available here in the diagram view, so that you as a user don't have to switch back and forth between the two views. You can basically decide which view you want to work in. There's a few exceptions, such as calculations, which is done in the data-driven view, where you actually have access to validating the calculations you're building. And there's some functions, such as creation of hierarchies, that only exist in the diagram view, but I'll get to that in a second. So let's have a look at how this would really work. Here I have all the data from my sales data warehouse, all coming from one source. The strength of PowerPivot is really mashing up data. So what I want to be doing here is take a look at how my sales are doing compared to industry trends. Industry trends doesn't really live in my data warehouse. So I have purchased some data out here on the internet that I have copy-pasted into Word. So all I want to do now is copy-paste this data, Control-C, go back to my modeling window, and simply paste it in here. Again, just give it a title, Industry Sales. Exact same copy-paste window that you're used to seeing from the data view, and paste it in. So we'll see the focus will shift here in a second to that new table that I've added. All new tables always go to the right of the diagram, and I can expand it. There it is. If I zoom out a little bit, Now, it's very easy for you to see all the tables that existed there from before are linked together. They have relationships, whereas this new added table doesn't have any. I can very easily change that because I am in a relationship diagram, so obviously one of the things that I can easily do in here is create relationships. I can either right-click the column and I get the create relationship dialog. This is the exact same dialog that existed on the data side that some of you may know from the previous release. But I can do it much easier than that. I can simply select this column and drag it and on top of my product subcategory table, and there you go. I have very, very easily in one click created a relationship. So here's where you see some of the interactivity you will get in the diagram view. Here, when I select the relationship that I just created, the tables light up, and so does the endpoint of the relationship. That's very handy if you need an overview of where, how your entities are connected. Here, for example, I can very easily see the tables at the end of each relationship endpoint in this category. You see I have fully zoom. I can zoom in. I have a mini-map here where I can easily navigate if I work in full zoom. And I can go back to see 100% there. So very interactive diagram view with a lot of modeling functionality. We will get back to that in a second. What I want to do now is take a look at using some of this data that I just added here. So I'll go and insert a pivot table. I have started with a little template here. So here you see the window into the model that I've built. And now I can click refresh because remember I added a table. So now you will see that I have the new table there that I added, which is the industry trends, the copy-pasted data. So let me go ahead and build a pivot table. I would first want to add sales amount. Then I can add, for example, product category and product subcategory. There you go. Very easily. A few clicks and there I have it. You see it actually now in this release also picks up the formatting from the model. So that's another benefit you get in this new release. So that was very easy. Now let's go ahead and compare with the copy-pasted data. I check industry sales and voila, it automatically adds that. So this is a really good example of how the diagram view enables you to very quickly create relationships. So now I'm mashing up data here from copy-pasted data with data from my sales data warehouse. Here I just chose to work with very simple calculations, it's just sum of sales. But let's say I wanted to do a little bit more complex calculations. If I look at my wholesales, for example, I have sales amount and I have product standard cost. Let's say I wanted to do profit. It's very simple. In theory, all I have to do is take the sales column minus the cost column. But it isn't actually that simple. What I need to do is sum of the two. So it's a little bit more complicated. And I have the measure UI here that we have in the previous release. But it could be hard for some newer users to actually understand the concept of working with measures when you don't have the context of your columns. So what we did was added a new feature, which brings me to the second feature that I want to show today, which is the measure grid. So we basically allow you to create measures or calculations, calculated fields in here inside the modeling window. So if I go here, I have, for example, product standard cost. I just want to create a very simple calculations, and I can do auto sum. So what this will do is basically enable this grid down here, which we call the calculation area. You can enable and disable it up here. And it will simply add a very, very simple measure calculation down here, taking, you can see here, the name of the column, total product cost, inheriting the formatting, and that is basically down there. I can do more than just sum. I have average count, distinct count, min and max, so I can quickly do an average as well. So this is a very, very, very easy way to do calculated fields. I can also multi-select. So by selecting these three columns and choose auto sum, with one single click, I've just created three fields here. So Next thing I want to do is go back to that profit example where it becomes a little bit more complex, because the grid down here is really a free form grid. I can type calculations wherever I want. So if I go back to the profit example, I can't just take this column minus this column, and that won't really work. What I can do is either create an additional column, or I can take the other calculations that I have here and use in my calculation. So that's what I'm going to do. I can click any cell. I type equal. You see I'm writing in the formula bar up here. And I take my calculation for sales amount minus the sum of product cost. All I do is point and click. I'm actually not really yet writing any formulas. And there you go. Here I have a new calculation. So two things you'll see here. It's called measure 1. Why is that? Because I didn't give it a name. And we do need a name because this is how you'll select this calculation from the field list. So I'll go in here and call this profit. There you go. So the name is basically to the left of the colon, and we'll change that. There you go. And the next thing I want to do is give it some formatting, since formatting now is persisted. So I'll go in at US dollars and remove the decimals. Very easy. So why does it sit exactly here? Well, because I put it there. I can very easily just Control X to cut it and paste it over here. Nothing changes. It's a free form grid. I can put my calculations wherever I want. I can cut and paste this one, put it over here, and the formula and everything is obviously still persisted. I can add regular text. I can say this is text. And that will show up in italic to just show you this is not a calculation. It won't show in the field list. It's just a way for me to add more comments to the grid. So that's a quick view of how you can create measures and calculated fields within the modeling environment. So now if I go out back into Excel, you'll see again I get a notification that the model has changed. I can refresh it. And when I scroll down, you see all the new calculations that I added, which are now free for me to use. So that leads me to the third feature that I would like to talk to you about, which is KPIs. If we go back to the pivot table that I built, I have sales amount and industry sales. Industry sales really representing the sales of all my competitors. So what I can use this for is tracking, for example, my market share. Typically a metric that I want to monitor over time. So I want to create a key performance indicator that's stored as part of my model for all users to use whenever they need to look at market share. So let me go over here and find sales amount again. It's there. Now I can right-click this calculation and say create KPI. I also have a ribbon entry over here, but I'll just go here and launch this KPI dialog. So now it automatically inherits the base calculation that I started from, because what I'm going to do is actually transform this calculation into a KPI. I'm enriching an existing calculation. And here I will see a drop-down list of all the existing measures that I created before. I'm actually missing my industry sales calculation, so I'll just quickly go back, cancel out of this one, go back into the modeling environment, go to my industry sales, which is my copy-pasted table, and just quickly create a new calculation here that I will call industry sales that I can use as a base for that KPI. So let me go back into Excel. I will choose, it has refreshed, so let me refresh this one, right-click the base measure that I want to use for creating my KPI, and create a KPI. So here you see the measure drop-down list. Now I see that industry sales. Okay, so I'll choose this. What I'm doing is taking my sales amount and comparing it to industry sales. Next, here I have my thresholds for when they are within the given ranges that I define as either good or bad. But in addition, I have some other settings I can do here. The way it's selected now, I say green is better, above 80%, and I show green. I can turn this around, obviously, if I'm talking about profit and loss, less is better. I can also say closer to target is better. If you're talking about machine park utilization, you want it as close to the target as possible, and the further you get away, the worse it would be. Okay? Also, I can obviously change the icon styles here. So I can choose different icons, and also I can change the granularity. So here I have fine ranges, and here I have 3 ranges. So let me go back in here to define the thresholds. I can use the thumbs to drag and drop. I can say, if my market share is less than 30%, it's red, I'm not really pleased. Or I can simply enter my result in here and say, if it's above 60, then I'm pretty happy. And I can go ahead and say OK. And you'll see now that that KPI status actually appears in here. I can just shorten the name a little bit to clean up the pivot table. And if you pay attention to over here in my field list, you can now see how that calculation has changed into a KPI. I've added more metadata to it. So here's my status, right? If I unselect my status, I get the exact same pivot table as I had before. Here's my value, the sales amount that I had, and I can add the status back in. What is really nice about this, now this is actually an object that is stored as part of my model, meaning when I publish this or share my this Excel workbook with other users, they can go ahead and use this with one single click. You don't have every user define their own KPIs, which is really important because this is a core metrics that should be consistent across the organization. So with that, let's move back into the modeling environment and have a look at, for example, user-defined hierarchies. When I built this pivot table, what you saw was I went to pull from different tables. So I have product category, and subcategory. If I have many users using this model, I want to clean this up a little bit and potentially only have one product table and just do one click and get this entire hierarchy into my pivot table at once. So let me go back into the modeling environment and show you how we can accomplish this. So over here I have my product tables, my product table, subcategory, and category. I have what I've done here is I've pulled in basically 2 columns, this column and the product subcategory table from column from over here, and pulled them into my product table. I've used that using DAX formulas, so I can quickly go here and show you how that looks like. I'm using a DAX function to pull the related columns from other tables, so I have it all in one table. That's for 2 reasons I'm doing that. First of all, because I want to hide these tables to clean up my field list, but also because I want to create a hierarchy, and for that they need to be in the same table. So let me maximize this table. What happens now is this table becomes my modeling surface. So you see the diagram behind me is blurred out. It's not because it's a defect. It's basically to tell you that the incoming relationships you see here are not really valid. This is my modeling surface. So let me create a user-defined hierarchy where I show product, category, subcategory, and category and product name. So I select product, multi-select, product category, and subcategory. All I have to do now is right-click, say create hierarchy, and automatically it will go ahead and create a hierarchy. I go directly into rename mode, so I call this products. Very easy to do. You see I have some names in brackets behind each field name, each level, and that's basically original source name. I can disable that over here if I want to, but they're very practical to have in here. So let's say I don't want this note to be called product name. It should just be product. But I need to know that up here, if I later want to go and delete this one, you will see down here that that will be deleted as well. So having the original source name, which only shows inside your modeling environment, helps you keep track on how things are related. For now, so I don't want to delete them, I can just go ahead and hide them. So now they actually won't show in the field list. I only have this hierarchy. So let's see how that would actually look in my pivot table. I'll go back out here. Now you see I have my hierarchy in there in my table. I'll go back into Excel. I can actually insert a new pivot table. I can add my sales amount. I can just add my sales amount from before, and let me go and find my hierarchy that I just built. So I go to the product table, and there's the hierarchy. There you see, one single click, and I got all 3 levels in there in a single click. Very convenient when you have a lot of users using your model. It will save them a lot of time, in particular for areas where you know they will always like to analyze these fields in conjunction. Same count for example, fiscal year, calendar year, where you want year, month, date, etc. So very easy way to optimize the use of the model for multiple end users. With that, let's go to the fifth and final feature that I would like to show you, which is perspectives. Perspectives is, in short, a view. So you can build multiple views over a single model. And you'll see here I have an advanced tab. The way you will actually enable that is out here. I can switch to normal mode, and this is how the add-in will show by default, and you actually don't have this advanced mode. We want deliberately to make this a little bit complex to find, because this is not a feature that is compelling for all users to see. So we didn't want to clutter up the UI with potentially intimidating features. But I want to show you this and how you can use perspectives. So let's go ahead and launch the dialog. So here, very simple dialog. I can go in and add a new perspective. First, simple, add a single field, a single table. I add one table, and I can deselect the columns that I don't want to show in there. So if I collapse this one now, you'll see I have a single table. Let me add a few more perspectives. So I can first say I want to look at, for example, one perspective for reseller sales and another one for wholesales. So let me do wholesales first. I can go in here and I can say wholesales. I also want to see the products, and I want to see customer and date, for example. Now, for reseller sales, almost the same, so I will just do a copy just to save time, and I can rename this one to be reseller sales. Now, obviously, I don't need wholesales in there. I need reseller sales and resellers. So that was basically a few clicks, and you have created very easily some perspectives. So let's go and see how this would look like for the end user. Now, if you publish this model to SharePoint, when other users connect to that model using a remote Excel connection, what they will do is actually get a connection UI where they will choose either to connect to the entire model or a perspective. That is not, it is a little bit different when just working with PowerPivot in Excel, because you don't have that connection UI. You are always connecting to the entire model. What you can do, however, is use the perspective as a way of filtering out your field list to make it a little bit simple to work with. So this drop-down didn't show before. It doesn't show when you don't have perspectives. But now that I've created perspective, you can see how I can filter out my field list to only show a limited set of tables. So here, let me show reseller sales. You see, wholesales are not there. A lot of the data isn't there, but it makes it much easier for me to work with this data. Again, nothing changes in my pivot table. I'm not changing anything there. It's simply a way to filtering out the data that I'm looking at when working with the field list. But there's one other area. I can also use it in my modeling environment. So now I'm probably having 15 tables in here, but imagine that I have 50. Then it becomes pretty busy in here. So let's say I just want to work with a subsection of my model. I can now go, we have added ability here to select a perspective, and I can have a look at just wholesales. What happens now is I see just this perspective. And as I add content to here, let's say I create a hierarchy, that will just be added to this particular perspective. So again, in addition to using perspective for end users to simplify the experience, we have added that functionality inside the modeling environment to allow you to also simplify the modeling experience for the person building the model. So with that, we have now seen the 5 top features: diagram view, hierarchies, calculate, measure grid, KPIs, and perspective. With that, let's just quickly go back to the deck for a few minutes. Now that you have seen the demonstrations of the top 5 features, I just wanted to quickly go back into the slide deck and take a look at all the other features that will be available with this release of SQL Server 2012. So as you can see, there's much more new features to come. And we kind of chunk it into 3 sections. You have features for building richer models, KPIs, as you saw, we've added annotations and descriptions, support for multiple relationships. On the other hand side, we also have done a lot of less visible features for simply optimizing usability. The measure grid is one example, but there's also a lot of other enhancements in that category. And finally, we have reporting properties, which will allow you to enhance your models for consumption of using Power View. So with that, that will end this session. Take a look at the features and enjoy your modeling.